Hi, I'm Jamie Batts, your instructor for A&P2. We're going to continue with our description and review of renal physiology and anatomy. We were just talking about kidney structure. Now we're going to start talking more specifically about the structure of a nephron and how they're put together. So let me switch-a-roni here to this screen. That's where we left off. Let's talk about the components of our nephron. Now, I strongly encourage you I know. I strongly encourage you to draw this out. I think that drawing and trying to work through illustrating this, as horrible as your artistry skills may be, mine are terrible, I think it helps you. It's going to help you in the long run when you struggle to create these things on your paper. It uses the other side of your brain, so do it. All right, you can just copy it from what a picture looks like. You don't have to do it from the words. But I strongly suggest doing that. So let's talk components of the nephron here, and then, as you're going back and reviewing, you can sketch out the structure of a nephron. So we have a renal corpuscle. The renal corpuscle is this area that collects the filtrate. So the renal corpuscle has a capillary network inside of it. And we'll talk more about this capillary network in a minute. It's called the glomerulus, or glomerular capillaries are within this corpuscle. So this corpuscle has these capillaries in it, and the capsule is creating this kind of area for the stuff that's being filtered out of your blood to go to. So it's kind of like a catcher's mitt. The whole thing is the corpuscle. It's made of a capsule or capsular space and a glomerulus. So the glomerulus is the capillary network. The whole thing is called the renal corpuscle. There's a renal tubule. This is where the filtrate goes. So after stuff is kicked out of the blood at the glomerular capillaries, it goes into this capsular space and then goes to the renal tubule. This renal tubule can be very long, and this is where all of the ion concentrations will be adjusted in your pre-urine stuff. So this is the stuff that will eventually become your urine. We call it filtrate. So filtrate equals pre-urine. So the renal corpuscle, as I said, has that glomerular capsule to it. The capsule is kind of shaped like a cup. I think of it like a catcher's mitt. And then the glomerulus is inside of it. So this whole thing is the corpuscle, right? The catcher's mitt, so to speak, catches all of the junk that's kicked out of your blood at that glomerulus, or in that glomerular capillary. All right. The first section of the renal tubule is called the PCT, or proximal convoluted tubule. This PCT will then take back the majority of your filtrate. It takes back the majority of stuff that was just kicked out. So to review, blood's flowing along, and we'll talk about the series of vessels that the blood has to go through to get to the glomerulus. As the blood's flowing along, it eventually ends up at the glomerulus. At the glomerulus, the capillary, right, a lot of junk is going to be kicked out of our blood, right? This is ions, water, not proteins, not glucose unless you have really high glucose levels, right? So there are some things that belong in urine and some things that don't belong in urine, and we'll talk about that later. But this is mostly ions and water that's being kicked out here at the glomerulus. The capsule's catching it, acting like a catcher's mitt. And then the first section of the tubule that's coming off of our catcher's mitt is called the PCT, or proximal convoluted tubule. And the majority of those things that was just kicked out goes right back in. So there's our renal corpuscle. This is a cross section. So you see the glomerulus, there are all these capillary networks in there. That's what all those little kind of pink circles are. The nephron loop is the next step on the tour through the nephron. So you have the proximal convoluted tubule, then the nephron loop. The nephron loop is just that. It's this long tube that kind of loops down and swoops back up. What the nephron tube does is it creates a gradient that's going to pull water and ions out of the filtrate, out of the stuff that's in the tube, right? There's a thick segment and a thin segment to our nephron loop. We'll get into all the details in a little bit. After the nephron loop, we go into the DCT, or distal convoluted tubule. The DCT is another section that's going to adjust the fluid concentrations, or the filtrate concentrations. So the stuff that's in the tube is the tubular fluid, or the filtrate, or the pre-urine, right? This is the stuff that's going to go to your bladder and you're going to get rid of. But your body wants to make sure that it's getting rid of everything that needs to get rid of, and not getting rid of too much and not getting rid of not enough. So that's why this whole process exists, to make sure that whatever is in that filtrate is stuff that you really need to get rid of. Here's the whole thing. This is what I suggest redrawing and recreating. You have this corpuscle, right? This capillary network of a glomerulus and a capsule surrounding it, the catcher's mitt. The PCT, lots of stuff is being reabsorbed at the PCT. Nephron loop, DCT, right? And from the DCT, it goes into the collecting system. Take a look at this diagram, though, because what you'll see is a glimpse at what's coming with our nephrology, study of nephrology here. We have an awful lot of filtrate being produced here at the kidneys. In fact, it's probably in like, towards the end of this PowerPoint, but there's some statistic. If you were to just pee out all of the filtrate that's produced at the renal corpuscle, right, at that first step, if none of it were to be reabsorbed, you would pee something like 8 liters a day, something crazy like that. It would be crazy. You would literally just have to go to the bathroom, or bladders would just have to be bigger to hold all of that. Either way, our PCT is the first step. Look at these arrows. What does this mean? These arrows are showing you that water and solutes are being reabsorbed in the PCT. Then we go through our nephron loop. Our thin segment is reabsorbing water. Our thick segment is reabsorbing solutes. Now, what you don't see in this picture, and you might be saying, okay, well, it's being reabsorbed, but where does it go? You don't see the capillary network that's surrounding this structure. So we see, yes, here is a capillary, this is the glomerulus, but when we're reabsorbing water and solutes from the PCT and the nephron loop, and eventually in the DCT, where is it going? This whole area is kind of covered, like, think like spider web covered, like just crisscrossed everywhere with these capillaries. The capillaries that are going to suck up all of the water and solutes that are being reabsorbed from this filtrate. So the last step on our tour is the DCT, and notice these are dashed arrows, and what that means is it's variable. It's variable water and solute reabsorption in the DCT. The reabsorption at the DCT is dependent on hormones. Let's review hormones briefly. We'll talk about them more later, but there are 2, maybe 3 hormones that we've talked about several times in this class that will influence the release of urine or solutes. Will influence the volume of urine or solute concentration of your urine, specifically sodium. Right? Aldosterone and ADH, right? These hormones are going to influence how much you're peeing out and how much you're keeping in your body. And that is exactly where those hormones, ADH and aldosterone, function. They function right there on the DCT of your nephron. So let's talk about the last stop on the tour through our little kidney, microscopic kidney structure, and that is the collecting system. First, I'll preface this by saying you might be thinking, I really don't get it yet. That's okay. This is just an overview of the anatomy. We're going to get all into the physiology. Trust me. So our last stop from the DCT, all of this filtrate now goes into the collecting system. The collecting system is a series of tubes that's basically taking this filtrate away from the nephron, eventually into the minor and major calyx, through the renal pelvis, down the ureter, into the urinary bladder, right? So this is collecting the fluid from many nephrons. As I showed you on that first slide, there's all of these little chutes coming off of the collecting system there. Those are for all of the different nephrons. Carries that fluid through the renal medulla, goes into our minor calyx. There's two types of cells that line our collecting system: intercalated cells and principal cells. The intercalated cells, these are going to reabsorb hydrogen and bicarbonate ions, helping with our pH. And the principal cells are going to reabsorb water and secrete potassium. So again, final ion and water concentrations being done here. So even when the filtrate leaves the nephron, even when the filtrate leaves the DCT, it's not over till it's over. The collecting system can still readjust ion concentrations and water concentrations in your urine. There's the collecting duct, intercalated discs, and principal cells. So the collecting system has a papillary duct. This is collecting the fluid from multiple collecting ducts, and it's delivering that fluid to the minor calyx. And there you see, the papillary duct is the major duct. This is going, it's called the papillary duct because it's leaving through the renal papillae, right? So it would enter or exit the kidney medulla through those renal papillae, hence papillary duct. So you have all of these collecting ducts coming in from all of the different nephrons. Variable water ion reabsorption can occur based on hormone input, and then it goes to the minor calyx. Here's the whole thing together. You have your nephron, your renal corpuscle with the glomerular capillaries and our capsule collecting all of that filtrate, taking that filtrate into the renal tubule. First stop in the tubule is the PCT. Water and solute reabsorption occurs in the PCT. Then we go into the nephron loop. Thin segment first, this is where mostly water is reabsorbed. Thick segment on the ascending side, that's where solutes are reabsorbed. Then on the DCT, aldosterone and ADH are going to adjust filtrate concentrations as needed. That DCT leads to the collecting system, to the collecting duct, and the papillary duct, again, where final ion and water concentrations can be adjusted based upon what your body needs. There's just the nephron, all of the little pieces put together there, and the collecting system. So I'm going to pause the video here because we're about to get into blood flow through this system. It's very intricate, detailed, so we'll see you in the next video. Bye.